Hey YouTube, how's it going? It's been a little while. I've been really busy with stuff. Still working on my master's. I also have a full time job now, so I haven't posted in a while. Um, but I was kind of thinking about some stuff, and I was like, I want to talk about a few things with you guys. Primarily, I want to talk about mental health, medication, dopamine, and my own personal experiences with those things and with ADHD. Um, yeah, I would like to start by kind of going into my own experiences with some things, as well as just sort of defining what ADHD is, how these systems work, because I think that they're just hugely misunderstood. Primarily, how dopamine works in the brain is really misunderstood. How ADHD works is misunderstood as well by so many people. So, a lot of people, when you say ADHD, they think of some kid who is just really energetic. It's like, ooh, a squirrel, which isn't really the full picture. It's not really what's happening there. And it's I think it can be damaging towards people misunderstanding these individuals. They think focus, a squirrel, just don't pay attention to it. Do what you got to do. And I don't blame the ignorance, but anyways, what it really is, ADHD, is not so much that you have too much energy. That's more. You actually don't have more energy, and this whole energy and attention thing is more of a side effect than anything else. What ADHD really is it's an understimulation of dopamine. Um, because if you look at brain scans of people with ADHD, you find something very interesting. You find that the frontal lobes, this part right here, the frontal lobes, are understimulated with dopamine. The other thing is, what is dopamine? Because a lot of people misunderstand. Like a lot of people have heard of that, but they don't really understand what it is doing in the brain. So you have some neurotransmitters, right? These are like chemicals that connect synapses and they make things happen. You have all kinds. You have reward neurotransmitters. You have ones that cause pain, right? Ones that cause discomfort. Ones that cause euphoria. Ones that reinforce behaviors. And even the negative ones aren't necessarily bad. You need all of these things to have a healthy and functioning brain. Even things like pain and sadness are there for a reason. Stress, that's there for a reason, right? It evolved over millions of years, and I don't think you should avoid them necessarily. So, dopamine is one of your reward neurotransmitters. You have things like serotonin, right? Serotonin is responsible for things like fulfillment, feeling loved, things like that. You have things like norepinephrine, responsible for things like excitement, like when you go on a roller coaster or skydiving. It's a type of reward. And you have dopamine. So that's one of your reward systems. But a lot of people misunderstand what exactly dopamine does. They know that like drugs cause dopamine, but what exactly is dopamine doing? So what dopamine's main thing is it's reinforcing behavior that releases that chemical. So, for example, a lot of people think like for a lot of people know that food gives you dopamine, so they think the food itself is what's addictive, and not quite. You do get a spike from it, but what happens is your brain is trained to do the behavior that releases dopamine, right? So It's not so much that you're addicted to food itself, as much as you are addicted to whatever pattern of behavior gets you food. In caveman times, that was hunting, and hunting was extremely addictive. It was a good kind of addiction because if you enjoyed hunting, you got lots of food. It was fun. But if, let's say, in modern day, you don't have to hunt, it's whatever it is that's getting you food. So for a baby, like a child, crying gets them food. They get addicted to crying, actually. So that's what dopamine really does. It's like a reward chemical that reinforces behavior and motivates you to do that behavior if it releases that chemical. A lot of drugs, here's the problem with a modern society and a lot of drug use. What drugs do is that they activate this dopamine thing. A lot of people think that it's the drug itself that is making you addicted. In part, yes, but also you get addicted to behaviors that get you drugs. So so the actual act of like buying the drug, the actual act of ingesting it is addictive. It makes you want very motivated to do that behavior. But it's not just drug use that can be a problem like that. It can even be things in modern day like cell phone use, video games, pornography. All these things release a lot of dopamine, and it makes you extremely motivated to pursue those acts. And the problem is, you can oversaturate your dopamine thing. So, with the example of drugs, if you take too many drugs, you get too much dopamine from that. You don't get it from things that you should be getting dopamine for to live a healthy lifestyle. You stop caring about doing your homework. It used to be that doing homework gave you dopamine. You don't get motivated to do homework because, in comparison to drug use, the amount of dopamine you get from doing homework and cleaning your room is far less than the drug use. But it's not necessarily just drug use. It's also things like, for example, pornography use. If you look at people nowadays, they have a lot less sex than they used to. Why? Because of pornography. Pornography releases so much dopamine, it's so stimulating, that it makes you not motivated in the pursuit of acquiring a sexual partner. So if you look at young men these days who are addicted to pornography, they seem almost disinterested in actually approaching women. This is because they're oversaturated their dopamine system. Now, why am I talking so much about dopamine? Because that's exactly what ADHD is. ADHD is you don't get enough dopamine normally. Your baseline levels are just low. And this is a problem. And the other thing is, it's not just genetic, it's also environmental. If you oversaturate your dopamine system, you become desensitized, you essentially induced ADHD. So there's an environmental and a genetic factor. It's very genetic. We know that if your parents have it, you're very likely to have it. But it's not just that, because we saw that the rates of people being diagnosed with ADHD has gone up. And it's directly correlated to things like video games, cell phone use. Like when you go on social media and it has a 10-second video overlaid with some Sigma male music, and the bottom half of the screen is someone playing a video game. It's so much stimulation that the normal things that are supposed to motivate you don't do that anymore. That's what ADHD is. You don't get enough dopamine from normal things. So you're constantly seeking anything that gives you dopamine. So if you put a child with ADHD in a classroom, boring as hell, they're understimulated. They can't pay attention to the teacher. They're just seeking, they're like, I need something to put in my brain. I'm going to walk around in a circle. I'm going to talk to this random person here. I'm going to daydream about stuff. They can't sit still. It's just not enough things entering their brain. That's essentially what it is. It's similar to depression. A depressed person, though, it's like serotonin. You treat it with serotonergic drugs, right? And that's not just genetic. Sure, it's genetic that your baseline is lower, but it's also your environment. Are you getting enough things that give you fulfillment and love in life? That'll make you depressed. With dopamine, it's a similar concept. Your genes will affect your baseline, sure, but it's also how much stimulation you have been ingesting, especially during childhood. If you take a child and you sit him in front of video games all day and TV, and he never goes outside, and he never does basic things that you should be doing as a child, his or her, but more often than not, it's actually boys that get it, the dopaminergic system becomes oversaturated, and normal behavior is no longer rewarding. And it's like everything in life is overwhelmingly boring. That's essentially what it is. It's not like depression. It's like a boredom. It's like everything is so boring that you're just like you'd like be like, dude, I'm gonna jump out a window just to have some kind of something because this is so boring that I can't stand it. I'd rather be lit on fire just to cure the boredom. That's what ADHD is like, and that degree of it varies based on genetics and based on environment and your upbringing and things like that. Now, I'm someone that was diagnosed with ADHD when I was, I think, around 6 or 7 years old. Um, and my experience was just that. I could not sit in class. I was bored. I would just start wandering around the room, looking out the window. They would say, think about this and read this. I can't read stuff. There's no pictures involved. I was just like, I need a daydream about things. I need to do things that are exciting and stimulating. And if I don't get that, I felt like uncomfortable. Um, and then in second grade, I was put on medication. I was put on Focalin. The way ADHD medication works is it gives you dopamine. It's literally drugs. So it increases your dopamine, helps you focus. They did that for like a little bit in second grade. Then they stopped just to see what happens, I guess. And then when I was in high school, I wasn't doing so well. They gave me, tried a bunch of things, Focalin, Vyvanse, Adderall, and my grades surely went up, and it does help um, in the short term. And I stopped in college, and it's only when I stopped that I overcame it. And I don't recommend people do that stuff necessarily. Let me get into why and how you can actually overcome mental illness and things like that. This idea that is being pushed nowadays is that mental illness is out of your control. Oh, you're depressed? It's your neurochemistry, and there's nothing else to it. You have ADHD? Tough luck. It's just your genetics. You're born that way, and there's nothing you could do about it unless, except for take medication, and that's just wrong. That's not true. And the medication is like a temporary band-aid. It's a crutch, and it's just going to make it the issue actually worse. The solution actually is to confront these uncomfortable feelings. And it's only when I did that that I started being able to take hold of my life. And it's not perfect. I have things to work on. But this is my personal experience is that I stopped taking this medication and I just forced myself to do things that weren't stimulating. I retrained my brain's reward system. I kind of just like, and here's some tips that might help you guys out with that. When you wake up first thing in the morning, don't go on your phone. If you go on your phone immediately, what happens is your brain goes, oh, look at all this reward I'm getting. I am not seeking behavior that induces reward. What dopamine is supposed to be doing is it's supposed to be reinforcing a behavior. You're supposed to be motivated to do work that gets you the reward. If you get the reward without doing work, your brain is going to be like, why am I doing work? Don't do anything that gives you dopamine in the first half of the day. Only do it maybe in the later half of the day. After you finish your schoolwork, after all that, go ahead and play video games. I'm not saying never play video games. What I'm saying is cut down on the amount you're doing it, especially first thing in the morning. And I'm serious, try this out. Don't go on your phone. Don't watch pornography. Don't do anything first thing in the morning except clean your room and do the assignments you need to do and maybe go to the gym and do those things. And do that for a couple months. And I'm telling you, you will start to retrain your brain to be able to do the things you were always supposed to do as a human being. and you will start like enjoying your life again, and you won't be in a constant state of boredom. And it's only that once I realized, oh, I shouldn't be constantly forcing stimuli onto myself, but actually depriving myself of it is the answer. Did I actually like start becoming a lot happier? Did I start becoming able to control my life and my own actions and thoughts? Um, yeah, and that was some of my experience, and I think that translates not to just ADHD, but things in general like anxiety, depression. You're not solely a consequence of your genetics. You're also a consequence of your environment. Don't just take drugs and hope for it to go away, because all that's gonna do is make you dependent on drugs. And I'm not saying that drugs can't be useful. Some people genuinely need it, and if you do, what you should be doing is the minimum effective dose. With for example Adderall, a lot of people I talk to barely have any symptoms of ADHD and are on like 40 milligrams of Adderall a day. Why are you on so much? You need like at most 10. I don't even think people should be taking that stuff. It's like poison for you. But if you do, minimal effective dose to do what you need to do. You don't need 40 milligrams when you're like a little child in school. And that's kind of been my experience with some of these things. If you have anxiety, confront the thing causing the anxiety and work through it, and sit there with the uncomfortable feeling. So, another thing with ADHD that really helped me is I would meditate every day. I would sit there in the morning and I would just sit on the floor, no music, no TV, no anything, and just sit there with my thoughts. Not even try to daydream, just sit there. Just relax and sit there. And you feel really uncomfortable. Not just bored, but you start to feel physically uncomfortable. Just sit there through that feeling and just relax. Just let that feeling pass you by. And I promise you, if you do that every day, you will start taking control of your brain again. Um, and hopefully that was helpful to some people who like had a similar experience as me in life. All right, take care, guys.